Great lawyers don't always know how to build great law firms. Let's change that. Join Ben Gideon as he shares hard-won lessons from building his own financially successful law firm and practical insights from top law firm entrepreneurs, business consultants, and more. This is a podcast for lawyers, by lawyers. Welcome to Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm. Produced and powered by Law Pods.
Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm is sponsored by Supio. Supio is a cutting-edge AI program designed specifically for plaintiff trial lawyers. I have to say, I did their demo just the other day. It is a fantastic product. It does so many things well, but one of the things I was just blown away with is the way it creates medical bill summaries that have been the bane of the existence of paralegals and plaintiffs' firms for decades. It does it in seconds. It's able to identify every bill from every provider, organize it, and then identify records where there's a bill but no record, and it can keep that going throughout the life of the case. It can do a million other things, which we'll talk about as we go forward, but you should get on Supio. They just got their Series B funding. They've got 60 plus employees. It's a great business, and get on and do the demo and see what they can do for you if you're in a plaintiff's practice. We're also brought to you by Vision Spark. Vision Spark is the search firm that specializes in finding your law firm, someone like Jeff Wright. We used Vision Spark to find our COO, and I've got to tell you, it was an incredibly good process. So I can talk from the side of the business owner who's searching for a COO. What was the process like from your side, Jeff, as the person being recruited?
It was thorough. It was. I felt at times I was being interrogated, and it was a long process, but it was probably the most thorough process I've been through in my career. And their follow-up, even since I've been hired, we've had monthly calls, and they just want to follow up. And I think the way they put it was, we want to make sure we didn't sell you a bill of goods, Jeff. We want to make sure everything we told you was correct, that it was a good fit. What made it a good fit? What did we do right? What did we do wrong? And I think you couldn't ask for more in a search firm.
Yeah, and I think, we obviously made the right choice in hiring you, but they found an amazing pool of really top-notch candidates, which, you were the best of, Jeff, which speaks to you. But they found people we never could have located on our own, people from different states, people with extraordinarily interesting backgrounds. The expense was actually worth its weight in gold. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking for an implementer or a COO, I think they can also do some other positions, but I would reach out and talk to the folks at Vision Spark. And finally, the podcast today is brought to you by 1% for Planet. Our firm, when we started, committed ourselves to joining 1% for Planet. 1% for Planet is an organization where members like ours commit to giving 1%, in our case, of all of our fee revenues to environmental nonprofit organizations. It's been a wonderful fit for us. We've probably contributed to 24 really great organizations that help preserve the environment, particularly in the northern New England states where we practice. It allows us opportunities to attend events like the one you just went to, Jeff, which I forgot what that was for, but
yeah, it's an organization down in southern Maine that is a refuge for injured wild animals, and they try and rehab them, and the ones that are unable to be rehabilitated to a point that they can go back to their natural environment, they house them there, and they use them as to teach classes and teach children. They've rescued somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 injured wild animals in the last 5 to 7 years. It's an extraordinary organization.
Yeah, and it's just so great to be able to support all these organizations. And when you are a member of 1% for Planet, one of the cool things is you're authorized to use the 1% logo, and we do. It's on our it's part of our branding as a firm. It's on all of our digital marketing. It tends to be on our it's on our letterhead. I mean, when we submit a brief to the court, it's got the 1% for Planet logo on it. And I just think it's a nice thing to have your business associated with something positive like that, to send a message to the world that you are giving back. And we would encourage all law firms that have the means and interest to contact 1% for Planet and become members. And if you do that, please reach out to us and we will give you a plug on the show as a new 1% for Planet member.
Welcome to the Elevate podcast, introducing Ben Gideon and myself, co-host Jeff Wright. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Gideon Asen here in Maine, and Ben has asked me to co-host with him today. And Ben.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. So, Jeff, I understand this is your very first podcast ever. You seem a little bit nervous, but don't worry. You're gonna be just fine. You're gonna get through it. But how are you feeling about this?
I'm feeling good about it. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but have not had the opportunity to be on one. And when you asked me to be on one, I jumped at the chance. So I'm looking forward to our conversation and what we're going to accomplish here.
Well, cool.
So you do another podcast, and I guess, what made you choose to do this second one? This is obviously the premiere episode, and what differentiates this podcast from your other one?
Yeah, so we've got a podcast that we've been doing with my co-host Rahul Ravaputi from Los Angeles. It's called Elevate, the Trial Lawyer Podcast, and as the name would indicate, it focuses on issues that are interesting and important to trial lawyers, and that it's more about the strategy and the techniques of trying cases. What you do in a courtroom, how you prepare your case for trial. And I'm very interested in that and have been for a long time. But one of the things that happened is and we've been putting out episodes now for about 4.5 years. It's hard to believe, but it's been probably over 100 episodes. But one of the things we've heard from a bunch of our listeners who regularly listen to that podcast is that they are also law firm owners, or they manage their firms, and they've asked us whether we might have more content on the business side of building a law firm and growing a law firm and things that go into that. And I thought, well, that would be something that would be very fun to do. I have gotten really into thinking about and fascinated by the business side of the practice, but I didn't want to dilute our other podcast because I know some people tune in just to get focused information about trial practice. So that's kind of the concept behind this new venture that we're embarking on today.
So more the business side of the firm as opposed to the trial side.
Yeah, and I mean, as you know, Jeff, we started this law firm, my partner Taylor and I, about 4.5 years ago. And over that time, we've made a lot of mistakes. We've figured some things out. We have groped around in the wilderness trying to find good information, trying to find mentors and advice and models for how to build our own firm. And I think ultimately we've done so quite successfully. Our firm has been very successful starting from scratch and building out to be extremely financially successful. And we've put together a really great team. And so I felt like it would be fun to share some of the lessons that we learned through that process with people that are trying to go through the same process themselves, because one of the things I found when I went out and looked for good information was it was really hard to come by. And part of the reason for that is that everybody is trying to sell you something. Everybody seems to have an agenda because a lot of the content that's out there for building, growing, scaling up a law firm is put out there by people that are in the industry of selling things or services to lawyers. And so, although some of that content can be extremely valuable, the problem with it is it all comes with strings, which is that it's being promoted from the perspective of somebody who has a financial interest in selling you on an idea or point. Whereas the concept of our podcast is that we are a law firm and trying to navigate our way to make the decisions for ourselves as lawyers and filtering through all of the different messaging and different options that are out there that are constantly in your face and trying to push you in different directions. And I really wish when we had started our practice, someone had taken me under their wing and said, hey, this is how you do this. This is how you do your branding. This is how you do your marketing. This is what you should be looking for when you're hiring. This is the first priority and the second priority and the third and so forth. And really giving a roadmap to how to do it. And that's what I'm hoping we can do, kind of phase one of our show. But then at the same time, we're still, I would say we're moving out of the wilderness now into a more predictable, managed firm environment. But that itself brings with it a whole set of new challenges as we move to the next phase of our growth. And I'm hoping to bring our listeners along with us as we go through that phase and kind of make decisions and navigate through that in real time. And we're going to bring in people that are going to help us do that. And by extension, hopefully help our listeners do the same.
So, Ben, I think it's important for our listeners to kind of understand the genesis of this and how it came to be before we let them know how I came to be at the firm with you and what we're doing now. So you've been an attorney for more than 2 decades. What was the catalyst, or was this something you were thinking about for a long time, to break away from being an employee at a firm to going out on your own with a partner?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a very hard thing to do because first of all, being successful as a lawyer requires a significant foundation of support and resources that you really don't appreciate as much when you have it and you've come to expect it. And I'm talking about all of the infrastructure, the staff, the systems that are in place at a successful firm that allows you to do your job without thinking about all the building blocks that go into that. And so I was at a firm that had been in existence for over 100 years, had developed significant market share and name recognition in our market. I had started there as an associate and grown up into a partner and was offered ownership and became an owner of the firm and was on the managing committee of the firm for more than a decade. And through that understood what went into managing a law firm. And that firm was a reasonably good sized firm for a plaintiff's trial firm. We had about 15 lawyers and 40 some odd support staff. So, and I had a very comfortable position there. Job security was, highly compensated. And so and I really enjoyed the practice. I liked and was very close to many of my partners there and many of the staff that worked closely with me, in some cases for 15 to 20 years. So leaving that was really, really hard. And I think as a lawyer thinking about moving on from wherever you are, it gets, one thing to keep in mind is that gets harder as the years go by. I mean, because your attachments, I think, are not as strong when you're just starting out in your practice. If you've only been somewhere a year or two, well, it's not probably that big of a deal to move on and start something new. As you become more ingrained somewhere, the forces needed to separate are much more difficult. So I think that's something people should think about in terms of the timing of if they want to start their own law firm, when they do it. I think the flip side of that is when you wait longer, as I did, you've already developed a reputation which can translate into immediate workflow cases and ability to generate revenue right away in a practice, whereas people early on who don't have that reputation may not have that same opportunity. And then, of course, there's the ability to invest in a practice. I was lucky enough to have substantial financial capability to invest money to build our new firm, and we could really hit the ground running and do a lot of the things that a lawyer who doesn't have those resources wouldn't be able to do starting out. But back to your question, I did it because I had always dreamed of having my own firm. I think inherently I'm an entrepreneurial person who likes the idea of building something and the challenge associated with it. And after doing what I had done at the other firm for 17 years, frankly, I was just bored. And you only live once, and life doesn't come around a second time where you get another opportunity to live the life and do the things you want to do. And it just occurred to me that this is something I wanted to do, and there was a huge risk associated with it. But I mean, at the end of the day, these are calculated risks. I know that when I set my mind to do something and I have a concrete plan and I can execute on it, most of the time it's going to work. I had a long track record of doing that, and I was confident in myself that I could make it work. Were there still a lot of sleepless nights where I'd wake up in a cold sweat wondering, how I was going to put my 3 kids through college with no salary?
I just do?
Yeah, there was a lot of that. And, but that's made it even more gratifying to see how what the project we began has really taken off and been able to succeed, because I can think back to the dark days of the immense anxiety and stress that were there at the early days. But let me turn that back on you, Jeff, because you're not going to get away with just asking me questions. So you're somebody who we found after an extensive search, which we'll talk about maybe later in another episode, where we focus on how to find the right person to be your chief operating officer, integrator in your firm when your firm's ready for that. But you came to our law firm having never worked in the legal services sector, having a long career in business and specifically in banking. But can you tell us about your journey? Where have you been? Where did you come from? And why did you make the decision that you wanted to come to a trial law firm to be our COO?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think it's important for our listeners to know I am not an attorney. I've never been an attorney. I've not gone to law school. I've never worked in the legal field before. I kind of cut my teeth in the brokerage world in the late 90s, transitioned over to banking, was fortunate enough to hold a lot of leadership roles at a variety of banks, oversaw a lot of projects, core conversions, and including a substantial merger between 2 banks that I was a point person on. So my operational ability to manage growth and manage especially change for clients and change for customers is something that I always thought was transferable to other industries. Quite frankly, I mean, to steal what you said, I was bored and I was tired of banking. I had been in banking and brokerage for close to 25 years. I was looking to find an opportunity in an operations role. My previous role at the bank was the chief operating officer. I came across your listing, read through it, and immediately thought to myself, they're not going to consider me. I have no background whatsoever in the legal field, but I think to your credit, you and your partner Taylor didn't want to hire somebody with a legal background into this role. You wanted someone with more of a business mind, business acumen to complement you. Went through, like you said, a pretty rigorous screening process with you, and I was fortunate enough to be offered the position. I've been here a little over 3 months now, and I know we'll get into it either later on in this episode or another one. Our first quarter of our 4-year strategic plan has gone very well, and I think we're on the path that we had envisioned. So it's kind of what brought me here, and I'm happy to be not only at the firm but part of this podcast.
And tell us about your experience over the 3 months. Has that matched what your expectations were coming in? What things are different and surprising to you, and what things are better, and what things do you think might be more of a challenge?
Yeah, I acclimated myself pretty quickly to the firm, quicker than I thought I'd be able to, and I think what kind of expedited my orientation, for lack of a better term, was I had been here for 5 days, and then we jumped on a plane and flew to Denver and met with an outside company to work on our strategic plan. So the ability for a small group of us from the firm, me having only been here for a week, to kind of hear the vision firsthand and be able to spend 3 days, with you and Taylor and the rest of our leadership team, expedited everything here, and it allowed me to hit the ground running and have a much better understanding. Most orientations, you hire somebody, you sit them in an office, you hand them the employee handbook, you ask them to read all the policies, procedures, and you attend some meetings, and you kind of sit there and just absorb. But you got me involved from the get-go, and I think it really made my transition easy. And in addition, there's a lot more parallels to the banking world than I thought there were, and I can very easily, our commercial lenders in the banking world are kind of like the attorneys here, and our loan processing team are very similar to the paralegals here. So there are a lot of comparisons that I can make in my head when I'm working with the team here.
One of the things that I've really enjoyed about working with you is that although your primary responsibility is on the operations side and management side, you've actually taken a real interest in the substantive work that we're doing. We've had multiple focus groups in a case. You've actually sat in and watched the focus groups. In some cases, they went on for 4 hours till almost 10 o'clock at night. You've been reviewing some of the animations, video things we've prepared for different cases. Did you have a good understanding of what legal cases were like before that, and what's your takeaway from now that you've kind of been more invested in some of the substantive work?
No, my knowledge was minimal to none, and probably like most non-attorneys, unfortunately, a lot of my knowledge probably came from Netflix series, or if I happen to be a party to needing an attorney for anything. But outside of that, understanding the inner workings or what goes into a plaintiff's firm and the amount of work behind the scenes on these cases and the dedication to the client to service the client in a way that this firm and hopefully all plaintiff firms are doing is incredible. And the reason, it's really twofold, why I attend the focus groups and why I've sat in on expert calls and depositions is, not only do I think it helps me do my job better and understand what the team is going through on a daily basis and what stage our cases are at, but it's a curiosity, and I actually enjoy it. It's not a labor to be part of those conversations. So it's very rare that I've felt this way in a role in a long time, and I'm very invigorated. You had mentioned something earlier, because I'm not going to let you ask me all the questions either. When you were making the transition, you said you had obviously the knowledge, you had the resources, but you mentioned the entrepreneurial spirit. I'm sure there's going to be attorneys listening to this that are very competent attorneys, have been doing it for a while, have over the years been compensated well, have the resources. But what would your advice be to someone that does not have that third piece, that entrepreneurial spirit? Do you think it's possible for that person to successfully go out on their own?
No, nor do I think they should. I think that it's, I think that a critical piece of building a successful law firm is that you have to have some interest and passion for the business side of creating the practice. If your real passion is solely and exclusively focused on doing the legal work, the legal services work, and I mean in any type, and our podcast is going to be intended to have value to people that are lawyers in any field, not necessarily just plaintiffs, trial lawyers, but that's what I happen to be. But whether you're a commercial litigator or a criminal defense lawyer, family lawyer, whatever it may be, or tax lawyer, I mean, if you find at the end of the day what you really want to do is sink your teeth into the tax code or write articles on the subject matter of the legal work you're doing, and you want your time to be solely 100% focused on your professional skill and practice, you should find a great environment in a well-managed firm that gives you the platform to do that, respects you, gives you the resources, and not embark on trying to start your own law firm. Because and I go back to, during the podcast, as we move forward, I'm going to reference some of the source materials that I've relied on and used. But one of the early books I read is called The E-Myth Revisited. The author is Michael Gerber. We've invited him to come on, and hopefully he'll come on and share some of his ideas. But one of the central ideas of that book is that, and the reason it's called The E-Myth is that what happens to a lot of people that are in business or that start businesses is that they are what Gerber would say, extremely competent technicians. They're very good at performing the work of whatever the business is that they're in. So one of the examples in the book is somebody who has a company that sells pies, and it's started by a woman who really just loves baking pies and is phenomenally good at baking pies. That's being a technician. That's being a baker. And the equivalent, of course, in the law world is you're extremely competent at doing the legal work, whether it's the criminal defense or the personal injury or whatever the case may be. You're just an exceptionally competent lawyer. That does not mean you're going to be a competent entrepreneur. And I think, and why he calls it the E-Myth is that people who become very successful because of their underlying competencies believe that will translate into starting a successful company. But it's actually the opposite of that, because if you focus entirely on the competency of the underlying service, you're not spending time, investing resources, and not necessarily have a passion for building the business. And a lot of times what business the skills needed to do that are quite different from the ones needed to be competent in the underlying service you're providing. So I think, I mean, the best first choice that a lawyer can make if they don't have that entrepreneurial spirit or passion or interest in doing that is don't do it. It's an enormous undertaking. I can speak from experience now in the last 4.5 years. My partner often says, if I had known how hard this was, I never would have done it. But it's really hard. You're starting from nothing and having to build into something. And, not all of it is fun or gratifying work. A lot of it is just doing the detailed, busy work needed to build something from scratch. So, that's first step is this something you really want to do? And do you have the right mindset for it? And then I would say part of that too is, when we started our firm, we didn't have, although we did have resources to invest at the beginning, it was just me, my partner who had been an associate in our prior firm and had taken the leap to come with me to do this project, and one paralegal. That was our starting team. And as you can imagine, if that's all you have, you're doing everything. You're wearing all of the hats, doing all of the jobs that need to be done. But one of those is you have to continue to practice law, and you have to continue to do the legal services and the work. And initially, so there's a big juggling process of, it's nice to think, well, I'm going to spend my time on building the business, not practicing the law, but you don't have anybody else to do the law part either. So what's been really gratifying as the business has grown is the ability now to have an opportunity to spend more time on building the business, which is, although necessary, is very difficult in the startup phase of the company.
Need help on a complex personal injury or medical malpractice case? Gideon Asen accepts case referrals and regularly co-counsels with lawyers nationwide on high-value claims. The firm has recovered millions of dollars in cases that competitors turned away because they dig deeper. Ready to learn more? Email bgideon@gideonasenlaw.com to start the conversation. Gideon Asen shares fees as permitted by the laws of each state. Don't let complex cases overwhelm your practice. Elevate justice together with Gideon Asen.
Now, during the interview process you had with me, and you've even mentioned it since I've been here, and I always found it intriguing, was you said most firms don't run like a business. And you said they may be very competent law firms, but they don't necessarily run like a business. I wonder if you could explain that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that is changing because that observation has been out there now for a while. And I think many law firms are doing a better job with it. But I think the classic law firm model, which is still the predominant model, is that the partners in the firm get together and nominate, one of their own to serve as the managing partner. And so, and then there's some kind of management structure that's set up, but dominated or exclusively the province of the lawyers in the firm. So the firm is managed by a lawyer and also run by a committee of lawyers. And so those are people that in most firms are also handling legal services and casework. So they don't necessarily have the time needed to devote to firm management activities that you would want to have in a real manager of your business. That's not always the case. But even if they do have the time, they don't necessarily have the background in business that they can bring outside experience in business to the table to help informed decision making. And then I would say the third issue is that they are answering to other lawyers who have a fairly narrow and somewhat myopic view of how they want the law firm to run, without, again, a lot of knowledge and expertise in business. And I think that tends to lead to a lot of inertia, a lot of decision making that's based on what's best for lawyers or lawyer egos, but without necessarily thinking about the other elements of the practice, the non-lawyer staff, how valuable that is, the marketing, the branding, and what's most effective for that, the management, and whether it's really best to have a firm managed by lawyers or whether somebody with better management skills ought to come in. So there's a host of issues that come with law firms that are managed only by lawyers. And so one of the things we've done in our firm is, even before we recruited for a chief operating officer and found you, we had put together a leadership team and made a conscious decision that leadership team would have a cross section of people from within the firm, not just lawyers. And I found that to be enormously valuable because we're now making management level decisions with an eye to how is that going to affect our paralegal staff? How is it going to affect our legal assistants and our administrative staff? What about finance issues, other things that are not necessarily the bailiwick of the lawyers in the firm? And then of course we do have lawyers on our management team, our leadership team. So the perspective of the lawyers is well reflected there. Legal services is well reflected there, but we're trying to build a firm where all elements of the practice are optimized and well run. Right? It's not just a firm where we have great lawyers and then everyone else is a second, an afterthought. And I actually think the non-lawyer staff really appreciate that because they see their representatives on our leadership team as giving them a voice. And I think from being here for 3 months, Jeff, that our non-lawyer staff are incredibly valuable, important to our mission. And in many cases, they are equally vested or even more vested in our cases, in our clients, in the work we do as the lawyers are. They don't see themselves as punching a time clock and, hourly rate workers. They view themselves as part of a mission, consistent with our core values and our mission to service our clients.
Yeah, no, I absolutely have seen that here, and the dedication of that support staff really is part of the engine that makes everything run as smooth as possible on a daily basis, and having the head of legal services as part of the management team, the leadership team, to hear and opine and make decisions is an absolute necessity going forward. So I like the way that is structured here a lot.
So we're going to try to keep our episodes to 45 minutes to an hour. And I know people have limited attention spans, as I do and you do, and also time to devote to this. But so I just want to give a preview for people that are tuning in. This is going to be our inaugural episode, what they can look forward to, what our podcast is going to cover, what it's going to be about. And so let me just walk through that and then we can wrap it up for today. But so we're going to start our journey at the beginning. We're going to talk about the considerations and the steps that a law firm needs to address in their, what I call the startup phase of a firm. And that's at the outset when it's, one author refers to as the rugged individualism phase of your business, where you're in the wilderness, where everybody has to wear a lot of different hats and you're constantly troubleshooting, putting out fires, and trying to grope and find your way forward. So we're going to start with that phase because every new business starts with that. We are through that phase, fortunately, but I think that's where a lot of businesses, have difficulty and struggle. So we're going to talk about that and give people a roadmap for getting through it, talking about some of our missteps, successes, failures, and things that wisdom we hope to impart through that. And so that's going to cover things like who should you start your business with, the right team, the right partners, talking about an initial business plan and a mission statement and how critical that is to getting off the ground right, and to make sure you've got, at least in concept, a plan that you can execute on going forward. Talking about what your organizational structure should be from the start and how to build that out over time. Talking about the prioritization of staffing and finding the right people and then putting them in the right seats. And we've had a lot of struggles with that. And we've learned some things about that I hope will be valuable to our listeners. I want to talk a lot about systems. We've made an effort from the beginning of our law firm to, when we're building things out, to build it out as a system that can be replicable, that can be predictable, that builds in accountability and allows for efficiency and time saving, so that when we do something once and we figure it out, the optimal way to do it, that it can be repeated and done that way again and again and again without necessarily having to have senior people involved. Talking about the idea of having key performance indicators, KPIs, but basically things that we can track that measure the growth of our business effectively, can allow us to take to get a snapshot of where we are and to hold people accountable. Talking about meeting pulse and how important that is. What are the structures of the meetings? When are they held? How often? Who's involved in those meetings? And what are the expectations in those meetings? I want to talk a little about, we're going to cover marketing and branding. So we were very intentional about how we positioned ourselves in the market at the outset, and I think it was highly successful. But now we're at a new phase where we're having to expand on that and move into another dimension for marketing and branding. And that's something that I've had to study a lot about and learn about, because it's not something I knew anything about before. And we're going to hopefully bring some people on who have expertise in that to help us. And I should say to our listeners, one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is because we need the help too. And so we're going to bring people on when we have issues that we need help on. We're going to bring experts on to educate us and help us, and help you at the same time, I hope. Talking about the concept of building internal capacity within our firm versus outsourcing responsibilities. There's a big movement now towards everything can be outsourced. There's a huge gig economy where you can hire people through Fiverr or Upwork, or there's many firms that will outsource elements of your law practice. And I want to talk about the costs and benefits of insourcing versus outsourcing, because I think there are things that you should outsource and many things that you should not. And there's enormous power that comes with building unique capacity in areas that are the core parts of your business. We're going to talk some about time management and ways to maximize the time that you spend as a law firm owner, and ways the management of time has to change as your firm grows, or you're not going to be able to grow. I want to talk about finances and profits. There's a concept of profits first, which I know Robert, who's producing our show, is a big believer in. But the idea that, I didn't have the luxury when I started this practice of waiting 2 or 3 years before we took money out. I mean, I have 2 kids in college, a big mortgage, a bunch of, expenses that I needed to be responsible for. But how do you prioritize, or how do you balance the need to take money out of the business versus reinvestment in a business and allowing it to continue to grow? So that's an issue we want to cover. I want to talk about legal services, and that, as we've discussed, our practice is a plaintiff's trial practice. We do high level med mal cases. We do catastrophic personal injury cases and other things that are kind of in that sphere, all on contingent fee. But in general, legal services, the topic of that is similar no matter what kind of legal service you're in. And we're going to talk about how to think about legal services, structure legal services department of your firm, and make sure that that's successful. So that set of topics are things that kind of bring us up to where we are now. So that's the startup phase of building a new law firm business. And then we're going to transition from that into phase 2, which is what we're currently in now, which is what I refer to as the managed firm phase of the business. So now you're out of the rugged individual wilderness and you're moving to something that is more managed and predictable because you have more of the seats filled in your organizational chart. But obviously that brings with it many new challenges, one of which is finding the right people for those seats, one of which is ensuring that you have adequate amount of business and revenue to support that growth. And another, and maybe the biggest challenge, and I know you've seen this, Jeff, is just the human relations and management of people, because every person you add creates more management challenges. And as lawyers, we're not necessarily great at managing people. That's an acquired skill. But it's extremely important once you get beyond your startup phase of the business. So as part of that, we're going to talk about the 4-year vision plan, having the vision plan. How do you create the vision plan? Having help in putting that together. And we're going to talk about having the right chief operating officer or integrator, and what our process was like in searching and finding somebody to do that role. But what are the elements you're looking for in somebody, and how do you go about finding that right person? We're going to talk about the role of outside consultants and where they may add value and where they may not. We're going to talk about building out an accountability chart, which we've done in some painstaking detail for our practice. Talk about how core values have to reflect, and the importance having focused and real set of core values that can guide your decision making. We're going to talk about financial planning, cash flow, funding resources. How are you funding your practice? How should you be funding your practice? And one thing I learned from Jeff is that you shouldn't have all of your money in a non-interest bearing checking account. So that was nice value added you brought in right away from your banking sector, which we probably should have been able to figure out without having a banking person, but we can get into some of that. Talking about building out marketing and branding as you're moving again from your startup phase to a larger business where you need more customers. You need to make sure your pipeline of work is always going to be full and continually replenished. So that's a mouthful. That's a lot of stuff. I know these topics, each one of them probably justify an entire episode, and we're going to drill deep on each one of them one at a time. Some of them will be able to bring our own insights and expertise to. Others we're going to need to bring people in who have greater knowledge and expertise, and we intend to bring in a lot of people like that. And finally, before we sign off today, I just like to say we would really love to hear from our listeners, people that are in different phases of either thinking about starting or building their own law firms. I think you can be a great resource to us. You may have suggestions for guests or for topics you want covered, and some of you actually may make great guests on the show if you've encountered a particular issue and have some insight into how to handle that. So we'd love to hear from you. You can just reach out directly to either Jeff or me or both of us. Jeff, do you want to give your email address so our listeners have it?
Yeah, so it's J Wright, WRIGHT, at GideonAsenLaw.com.
And you can reach me at Ben at Elevate, like the podcast, ELAWVATE.net. So again, anybody who's got an idea, something they want to contribute to this conversation, a topic you'd like to hear more about, a specific problem you've encountered that you want us to address or find a highly qualified guest to speak to, please reach out to us and we'd love to hear from you. So that'll conclude it for the day. Jeff, how did your first venture into podcasting feel for you?
It was good. It's a little like sitting in your office, having a good conversation, and the roadmap that you talked about on the sneak peek into upcoming episodes. I think there's enough to unpack there for about 147 episodes or so. So I'm looking forward to it.
It's a big undertaking.
It's a big undertaking.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this.
No, I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Elevate, Build and Grow Your Law Firm. Share with colleagues if you found it valuable. Remember, building a successful law firm takes discipline, strategy, and determination. But you're not alone. Produced and powered by LawPods.